Welcome to the fifth episode on the Soil Doctor tool, where I dive deep into the principles of organic micronutrients. I'm going to cover how to manage micronutrients. When I say micronutrients, you may be thinking kelp meal or rock dust, but that's not actually what I mean. When I say micronutrient, I'm referring to the elements needed in small quantities for plant growth that are essential. Those are iron, manganese, zinc, copper, and boron. There are dozens and dozens of other elements that are beneficial for plants, like silica, cobalt, what I call trace minerals, but they are not essential for photosynthesis and plant metabolism. Rock dusts, kelp meal, seawater products, they all contribute beneficial trace minerals, but this video is going to be about the 5 essential micronutrients. In general, plant metabolism really stops abruptly and yield loss happens quickly when macronutrients are deficient. When micronutrients are deficient, yield loss is often hidden, which is why the term hidden hunger is used in reference to micronutrients. So typically when something like copper is low, you can still get a good harvest and you won't necessarily see visual symptoms. Of course, when something becomes acutely deficient, especially iron or manganese, visual symptoms will appear. But for the most part, in living soils, these micronutrient deficiencies don't appear as acutely as, let's say, nitrogen or potassium. But increasing levels of micronutrients can absolutely increase yield, crop quality, secondary metabolism, disease resistance, and beneficial plant characteristics like stem flexibility or internode spacing. Most beginner growers ignore these nutrients or assume that their applications of kelp meal and rock dust will be sufficient, and this is just not the case. While I believe optimizing soil moisture and balancing macronutrients and tending to other fundamentals of plant health should always be the priority in any operation, once those things are taken care of, it's foolish not to then optimize micronutrients as well. If you don't, you're leaving a lot on the table, and in my opinion, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So how the Soil Doctor tool recommends micronutrients is using the micronutrient products iron sulfate, manganese sulfate, zinc sulfate, copper sulfate, and Solubor. These products are applied in very small quantities and are allowed in organic production if a soil test indicates a need for them. The best organic production across all agriculture comes from identifying which individual nutrients are low and applying them individually, which requires testing. Applying them in micronutrient blends is okay, but not optimal. So many natural growers have concerns about how these may affect soil biology, which is a valid concern. However, there's no evidence that I've seen that they negatively impact soil microbes due to the really small quantities that are applied. In fact, soil microbes need iron, manganese, zinc, copper, and boron for their metabolism too. So if any of these are low in the soil, it could theoretically be limiting certain microbial populations as well. The Soil Doctor tool has different target soil levels for each of these micronutrients. When one is low, it makes a really conservative recommendation to slowly build the levels of that nutrient. And when I say conservative, I've found that it usually takes 2 to 3 applications to hit the target number, depending on how low the nutrient is. The speed at which the tool builds these micronutrients in the soil can be metaphorically characterized as walking, not running. The tool primarily uses the standard soil test for zinc and copper, both of which have really low solubility in the soil solution. Most likely these two nutrients are going to show up as below the detection limit on the PACE test. However, when their solubility is high on the PACE test, the Soil Doctor tool doesn't recommend additional applications regardless of the levels on the standard test. Iron and manganese are the most commonly deficient micronutrients in living soils. About 50% of the Soil Doctor tool recommendations contain either iron sulfate or manganese sulfate. This is due to iron's poor availability in high pH, well aerated soils, which tend to be what living soils are. And the tool also gives a lot of tips and tricks on how to best apply iron to maximize uptake. It also provides various alternatives to build iron in your soil with carbon-based products that are slower releasing. Manganese is interesting. It's often low due to its high solubility and tendency to leach out of the soil. So both iron and manganese are also uptaken in somewhat high quantities for micronutrients and simply have to be replaced for optimal yield and photosynthesis. The Soil Doctor tool has a simple algorithm that changes the target level of iron based on the level of manganese, aiming for an optimal iron to manganese ratio, which is often an important nutrient ratio in agronomy. So finally, we have boron, the only anion of the micronutrients. So boron application rates are the smallest of any of these micronutrients. The Soil Doctor tool provides a rate for both Solubor and Borax, the two organically approved boron products, often at only 1/4 teaspoon per cubic yard of soil volume, which would be something like 10 pounds per acre of Solubor. And the tool provides information on the best way to apply these micronutrients, usually by dissolving them in water with humic acid or another carbon source and drenching them for really even distribution across the soil. It gives more details, like I said, for iron sulfate and applying through irrigation systems. So hit the link below and get a soil test, then check out the Soil Doctor tool to customize an organic recommendation for your soil.